Commander Hyunwoo stood at the observation deck of Research Station Alpha, watching the dying star pulse with angry red light through the reinforced windows. The massive solar body was in its final death throes, shooting deadly radiation across space that would kill most living things in seconds. Yet here they were, humans working and living just a few million kilometers away from certain death, studying the stellar collapse like it was just another day at the office. His coffee cup rattled against the metal table as another wave of gravitational distortion hit the station. The artificial gravity compensators hummed loudly, working overtime to keep everyone from floating around like toys in a shaken box. Most species would have evacuated this system months ago when the star first started showing signs of instability. Humans had moved closer. "Sir, we have 3 large contacts approaching from the outer system," called out Operator Kim from the communications bay. Her voice carried across the observation deck with practiced calm, but Hyunwoo could hear the slight tension underneath. Unknown ships this far from civilized space usually meant trouble. Hyunwoo walked over to the main display screen, his boots clicking against the metal floor. The screen showed 3 massive shapes moving toward them with impossible grace. Each vessel was easily 10 times larger than their research station, sleek and silver like drops of liquid metal floating through space. They moved in perfect formation, too perfect for any human pilot to maintain. "Any response to our identification signals?" Hyunwoo asked, though he already knew the answer from Kim's expression. "Nothing yet, sir. They're maintaining steady approach. Speed. At current velocity, they'll reach us in approximately 4 hours." Dr. So-min looked up from her workstation where she had been analyzing stellar radiation patterns. Her dark eyes reflected the red glow from the dying star outside. "Could they be automated probes? The movement patterns are too precise for biological pilots. Or they could be something we've never seen before," Hyunwoo replied quietly. In his 20 years of space service, he had learned to trust his instincts. Something about these ships felt different, alien in a way that went beyond just being unknown technology. The next 3 hours passed slowly. The research team continued their work, but everyone kept glancing at the approaching ships. When the vessels finally stopped just outside the station's defensive perimeter, they did so with such sudden precision that it made Hyunwoo's skin crawl. No human ship could stop that quickly without turning its crew into paste. "Incoming transmission," Kim announced, her fingers dancing over her control panel. It's in perfect Korean." The main screen flickered and resolved into an image that made everyone in the control room go silent. The being on the screen was clearly not human, though it had a roughly humanoid shape. Its skin was pale blue-gray, and where a human would have hair, it had what looked like crystalline formations that caught and reflected light. Most unsettling were its eyes, large, golden, and completely without pupils. "Greetings, humans of Research Station Alpha," the alien said in flawless Korean, though its mouth movements didn't quite match the words. "I am Ambassador Thekmore of the Velkari Empire. We have come to make contact with your species." Hyunwoo stepped forward, straightening his uniform jacket. First contact protocols were clear, even if no one had really expected to use them. "I am Commander Hyunwoo, representing the Human Colonial Research Division. We welcome peaceful contact with your people." Thekmore's expression was difficult to read, but something that might have been amusement flickered across its features. "Peaceful contact, yes. We have been observing humanity for some time, Commander. Your presence here, so close to a stellar collapse event, confirms much of what we have learned about your species." "What have you learned?" Dr. So-min asked, moving to stand beside Hyunwoo. Her scientific curiosity had overcome any diplomatic protocol about who should speak for humanity. "That you survive in places where others cannot," Thekmore replied simply. "Tell me, Doctor, why are you here studying this dying star instead of fleeing to safety like any rational species would do?" So-min glanced at Hyunwoo, who nodded for her to continue. "The data we can collect from a stellar collapse is invaluable. The radiation patterns, the gravitational waves, the formation of heavy elements, we can learn more in these few months than we could in decades of theoretical study." Even though the radiation could kill you in moments if your shields fail, we've built good shields, Soman said with a slight smile. And backup systems for the backup systems. Thekmore was quiet for a long moment, those strange golden eyes seeming to look right through them. Yes, this is what we expected. The Velkari Empire consists of 7 different species, Commander Hyunwoo. We have maintained peace and prosperity across thousands of star systems for over 10,000 of your years. We have come to offer humanity membership in our civilization. The words should have been cause for celebration. First contact with an advanced alien civilization, an invitation to join a galactic community. It was everything humanity had dreamed of since they first looked up at the stars. But something in Thekmore's tone made Hyunwoo's instincts scream warnings. What would membership require? Hyunwoo asked carefully. A simple process of cultural and biological compatibility assessment. Your species would be evaluated to ensure you can integrate peacefully with existing member species. Many races have joined us through this process. It is quite comprehensive. Dr. Soman leaned forward, her scientific mind latching onto something. You said you've been observing us for how long? Approximately 50 of your years. We have monitoring stations throughout human space, recording your activities and responses to various environmental challenges. Your species is unique in its adaptability. The way Thekmore said unique sent a chill down Hyunwoo's spine. In his experience, when powerful entities called you unique, it usually meant they saw you as either a valuable resource or a potential threat. Sometimes both. We would be honored to consider your offer, Hyunwoo said diplomatically. Perhaps we could arrange for a formal meeting to discuss the details. Of course. However, I should mention that the assessment process has already begun. We have been placing human settlements in various challenging environments to observe how your species responds to adversity. The results have been most illuminating. Soman's face went pale. You've been experimenting on human colonies? Observing, Thekmore corrected smoothly. We merely chose not to warn certain settlements about approaching dangers. Natural disasters, environmental hazards, resource shortages. We wanted to see how humans respond when faced with extinction-level challenges. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Hyunwoo felt his hands clench into fists at his sides. How many people died because you didn't warn them? That data is classified pending the completion of our assessment. However, I can tell you that human survival rates in impossible situations far exceed our projections. Where other species would have died out completely, humans not only survive, but often emerge stronger than before. Thekmore's image flickered slightly as another gravitational wave from the dying star passed through the system. The alien didn't seem concerned about the dangerous radiation that was currently bathing their location. Either their ships were incredibly well shielded, or they were more resilient than they appeared. We will send you the coordinates for the formal assessment locations, Thekmore continued. Representatives from your species will be required to demonstrate their capabilities in various scenarios. Consider it a final examination before full membership is granted. And if we refuse? Hyunwoo asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Thekmore's crystalline hair formation seemed to dim slightly. The Velkari Empire has maintained peace for 10 millennia, Commander. Species that cannot integrate peacefully with our civilization tend to disappear from the galactic community. I trust you understand. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the control room in tense silence. Outside the windows, the dying star pulsed with malevolent red light, as if reflecting the mood of everyone aboard the station. Hyunwoo stared at the blank screen where Thekmore's image had been, his mind racing through the implications of what they had just heard. Sir, Kim said quietly, we're receiving a data package from the alien ships, coordinates for 12 different locations across human space. Dr. Soman was already pulling up star charts on her workstation. These locations, some of them are in systems we've marked as too dangerous for colonization. Radiation zones, unstable planets, areas with gravitational anomalies. They're not testing us, Hyunwoo said slowly, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. They're trying to kill us. They want to see exactly how much it takes to wipe out humanity before they decide what to do with us. He looked around, at his team, seeing his own grim understanding reflected in their faces. They had just made first contact with an alien civilization, and it might very well be the last contact humanity ever made. 3 weeks after first contact, Jin-Ho found himself strapping into the pilot seat of a heavy transport ship, heading toward a world that should have been impossible to survive on. The planet designated as Test Site 7 had gravity 3 times, stronger than Earth's, and an atmosphere so toxic that breathing it would dissolve human lungs in minutes. The Valkyrie had specifically requested that he bring a team of engineers to assess the habitability potential of the world. Jin-Ho knew better than to believe their stated purpose. As a former military engineer, he recognized a death trap when he saw one. But he also knew that refusing the Valkyrie's invitation would likely result in something much worse than a dangerous mission. At least this way, they had a fighting chance. "Final systems check complete," announced his co-pilot Young-Soo from the seat beside him. "Environmental suits are functioning normally, backup life support is green, and the emergency beacon is active." Behind them in the passenger compartment, Jin-Ho could hear his team of 6 engineers going through their own preparations. They were good people, volunteers who had stepped forward when command explained what this mission really meant. Each of them knew they might not be coming home. "Sir," called out Min-Ho, the team's electronics specialist, "we're getting some strange readings from the Valkyrie observer ship following us. Their energy signatures don't match anything in our databases." Jin-Ho glanced at the display showing the sleek alien vessel maintaining perfect formation just off their starboard side. The Valkyrie had insisted on sending observers to document human performance during the assessment. What they hadn't said, but what everyone understood, was that these observers were there to make sure no humans escaped to warn others about what was really happening. The planet grew larger in their view screen. As they approached, a sickly green-brown sphere wrapped in swirling clouds of poisonous gas. Lightning storms raged constantly across its surface, and the gravity field was so strong that it had already begun to affect their ship's handling. Jin-Ho felt the familiar weight settling into his bones as the artificial gravity compensators struggled to maintain normal conditions inside the ship. "Landing zone is marked on your navigation system," came Thekmore's voice over the communications channel. The Valkyrie ambassador sounded as calm and emotionless as ever. "You have 72 hours to establish a functional base camp and collect geological samples from the marked locations. Our observers will monitor your progress." Jin-Ho wanted to ask what would happen if they failed to complete the task, but he already knew the answer. The Valkyrie weren't planning for anyone to succeed. This was an execution disguised as a test. The landing was rougher than anything Jin-Ho had experienced in 20 years of military service. The increased gravity made their ship feel like it was made of lead, and the atmospheric storms buffeted them constantly as they descended. By the time they touched down on the planet's surface, several warning lights were flashing on the control panel. "Hull integrity holding, but we've got microfractures in the forward section," reported Jin-Woo, their structural engineer. "The gravity stress is beyond what this ship was designed for." Through the viewports, they could see a landscape that looked like something from a nightmare. Jagged rocks jutted up from the ground at impossible angles, twisted by the planet's gravitational field into shapes that hurt to look at. The sky was a sickly yellow-green color, and lightning constantly flickered between the clouds overhead. "Atmospheric analysis confirms what we expected," said He Young, their environmental specialist. 60% sulfur dioxide, 20% chlorine gas, and the rest is a mixture of compounds that would kill us in seconds. Surface temperature is holding steady at -40 degrees Celsius. Jin-Ho looked at his team and saw determination mixed with fear on their faces. They all knew the odds, but they also knew that giving up wasn't an option. "All right, people, you know the drill. Full environmental suits, buddy system, and nobody goes anywhere alone. We've got 3 days to prove that humans are too stubborn to die." The Valkyrie observers watched from their ship as the human team began unloading equipment. Through their monitoring systems, they could see everything the humans were doing, hear every word they spoke. What they saw should have been impossible. Instead of setting up a simple survival shelter like any rational species would do, the humans immediately began modifying their equipment. Jinho's team took apart pieces of their landing ship and started building something that looked like a cross between a factory and a fortress. They worked in the crushing gravity without complaint, their movements efficient despite the environmental suits that made everything more difficult. They're adapting their technology to the local conditions, observed Veltar, one of the Velkari, scientists aboard the observer ship. This behavior pattern was not predicted in our models. Thekmore watched the humans through the ship's sensors, his crystalline formations flickering with what might have been uncertainty. All previous species attempted to maintain their normal environmental conditions for as long as possible before succumbing to the hostile environment. These humans appear to be embracing the challenges. On the planet's surface, Jinho was discovering that his team had capabilities even he hadn't expected. When their standard drilling equipment failed under the increased gravity, Daewon, the mechanical engineer, had somehow rigged up a new drill using parts from their emergency repair kit and the ship's backup power cells. The improvised device was actually working better than their original equipment. "How did you know that would work?" Jinho asked as Daewon's makeshift drill easily cut through rock that had been resisting their standard tools. "I didn't," Daewon admitted with a grin that was visible even through his helmet's faceplate. "But the worst thing that could happen was it wouldn't work, and we'd be exactly where we started." That attitude seemed to sum up his entire team's approach to their impossible situation. When the atmospheric storms damaged their communication, Aray Subin, the communications expert, didn't try to repair it. She built an entirely new system using parts scavenged from their personal equipment. When the crushing gravity made it impossible to move their heavy geological sampling equipment, Myung-ho found a way to modify the planet's own gravitational field fluctuations to help them. "Sir, you need to see this," called Hee-young from her monitoring station. She had been tracking the planet's atmospheric conditions, looking for patterns that might help them survive longer. "The storm patterns aren't random. There's a rhythm to them, almost like the planet is breathing." Jinho looked at the data she was showing him, patterns of atmospheric pressure and electrical activity that formed cycles lasting exactly 6 hours and 17 minutes. "Can we use this?" "Already working on it," Hee-young said, her fingers dancing over her tablet's interface. "If we time our outside activities to coincide with the low-pressure periods, we can reduce our exposure to the worst of the toxic gases, and during the electrical storms, we can actually tap into the lightning strikes for power." Aboard the Velkari observer ship, the alien scientists were becoming increasingly agitated. What they were witnessing defied every model they had for biological behavior under extreme stress. Humans weren't just surviving the impossible conditions. They were finding ways to thrive in them. "They've been on the planet for 18 hours, reported Veltar, his voice carrying notes of what humans might have recognized as confusion. Predictive models indicated total mission failure within 12 hours. Instead, they have established a functioning base camp and are ahead of schedule on their primary objectives." Thekmore was silent for a long moment, watching as the humans used captured lightning to power equipment they had built from spare parts. "Send a priority transmission to the High Council. Tell them we may have underestimated this species." By the end of their second day on the planet, Jinho's team had not only completed their assigned tasks, but had actually improved the efficiency of their operations. They had learned to work with the planet's extreme conditions instead of fighting against them, turning obstacles into advantages with a creativity that seemed to come naturally to them. "You know what's funny?" said Young-soo during their evening meal break, speaking around a nutrition bar that tasted like cardboard but provided essential calories. "I think I'm actually starting to like this place." "You're insane," replied Minho, but he was smiling as he said it. "The gravity is trying to crush us. The air would kill us instantly, and we're eating food that tastes like synthetic plastic." "Yeah, but look what we've accomplished." Young-soo gestured toward their improvised base camp, which had grown into something that looked almost like a small city. 2 days ago, this was considered an uninhabitable death world. Now we've got power, shelter, and a working laboratory. If we had a few more weeks, we could probably turn this place into a vacation resort. Jinho looked around at his team and realized that Young-soo was right. Somewhere in the process of surviving the unsurvivable, they had stopped thinking about the mission as a test they might fail, and started thinking about it as a problem they could solve. The Velkari had sent them here expecting them to die, but instead they had built something impossible. Daehyun pressed his face against the transport ship's viewport and immediately regretted it. The world below them looked like it was being torn apart by invisible hands. Massive chunks of the planet's surface hung suspended in space, slowly, rotating around each other in impossible formations. Between the floating land masses, streams of molten rock flowed upward through the air, defying gravity in ways that made his engineer's mind hurt. "Gravitational anomaly zone," announced Captain Han Sol from the pilot's seat. "We're looking at a planet being destroyed by a rogue black hole's tidal forces. The gravitational field changes are so extreme that our instruments can't get stable readings on anything." Mai Young, the team's physicist, was staring at her tablet with a mixture of fascination and horror. "The gravitational waves are creating space-time distortions across the entire system. Matter is behaving according to physics principles that shouldn't exist outside of theoretical models." Daehyun looked around at his 5-person geological survey team and wondered what exactly the Velkari expected them to accomplish here. Their previous test sites had been dangerous but at least comprehensible. Toxic atmospheres, crushing gravity, extreme temperatures. This world was being actively destroyed by forces that human science barely understood. "Incoming transmission." From the Velkari observation vessel, Han Sol announced. The alien ship had been following them at a careful distance, its sleek form somehow remaining stable despite the gravitational chaos affecting everything else in the system. Thekmor's image appeared on their communication screen, as calm and expressionless as always. "Human team, you are to establish a research station on the primary landmass and collect geological samples from the 3 marked locations. You have 96 hours to complete this task." "With respect, Ambassador," Daehyun replied. "Our scans show that the marked locations are moving in unpredictable patterns due to the gravitational anomalies. Some of them are currently floating several kilometers above the surface." "Yes," Thekmor said simply. "This is the nature of your assessment. Our observers will monitor your progress." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the human team staring at a world that seemed determined to kill them in the most exotic way possible. Through the viewport, they could see one of the floating land masses suddenly accelerate and crash into another chunk of terrain, the impact sending shockwaves that rippled through space itself. "Sir," said Kyungmin, their equipment specialist, "this is impossible. Our landing thrusters won't be able to compensate for gravitational fields that keep changing direction. We'll be crushed or flung into space within minutes of touchdown." Daehyun studied the chaos below them and felt something click in his mind. It was the same feeling he'd experienced during his military engineering days when faced with a problem that seemed unsolvable. The moment when impossible began to look merely difficult. "Maybe that's why we're not going to fight the gravitational fields," he said slowly. "Mi-young, those gravitational waves are following patterns, right? Even if they're complex patterns?" Mi-young looked up from her calculations, her eyes bright with sudden understanding. "Chaos theory. Even apparently random systems have underlying mathematical structures. If we can map the gravitational wave frequencies, we can ride them instead of fighting them," finished Soo-jin, their structural engineer. "Use the planet's own destructive forces to navigate safely." The Velkari observers watched from their ship as the human team spent the next 6 hours doing something that no other species had ever attempted. They were trying to predict and use the gravitational anomalies rather than simply enduring them. Their ship's computers worked overtime, analyzing wave patterns and calculating probability matrices for safe landing zones. This approach was not anticipated, reported observer Kethvar to his commanding officer. All previous species exposed to gravitational anomaly zones either fled immediately or were destroyed within the first hour of exposure. "Continue monitoring," replied Commander Zepthul. "The High Council wants detailed documentation of human behavior patterns, especially their apparent inability to recognize hopeless situations." On the human ship, Daehyun's team had developed what they were calling a gravitational surf approach to landing. Instead of trying to power through the chaotic forces, They would time their descent to catch a gravitational wave that would carry them safely to the surface. "This is either brilliant or the stupidest thing anyone has ever tried," muttered Han Sol, as he prepared for the most unusual landing of his career. "Probably both," Daehyun admitted. "But stupid plans that work aren't stupid." The descent was unlike anything any of them had experienced. Their ship rode the gravitational waves like a leaf on a hurricane wind, spinning and tumbling through space in patterns that should have torn their vessel apart. But Mi Young's calculations held true, and they touched down on the primary landmass with surprising gentleness. "Readings are stable for now," reported Junho, their survey specialist. "But the gravitational field is shifting constantly. We probably have about 20 minutes before this landing zone becomes uninhabitable." Instead of panicking, the team immediately went to work with an efficiency that surprised even themselves. They had learned from their previous missions that adaptation was more important than rigid planning. Within 15 minutes, they had established a basic shelter and begun deploying their equipment. "The marked sample sites are currently at coordinates that don't exist," Sujin reported, checking their objectives against the constantly shifting landscape. "Two of them are floating about 3 kilometers up, and the third one appears to be moving in a figure-8 pattern." Daehyun looked up at the chunks of terrain floating through the air above them, and made a decision that would have been considered insane under normal circumstances. "Then we go up and get them." What happened next would later be described in Valkyrie reports as physically impossible behavior that defies all known models of species survival instincts. The human team began building what could only be described as a gravitational catapult, using the planet's own chaotic forces to launch themselves toward the floating sample sites. "The principle is simple," Mi Young explained as she made final adjustments to their improvised launch system. "We time our launch to coincide with a gravitational pulse that will carry us upward. Then we use the return wave to bring us back, down safely." "What if you miscalculate?" asked Kyung-min, who would be operating the equipment that would either save them or kill them. "Then we become the first humans to die in a gravitational anomaly zone," Mi Young replied cheerfully. "But we won't miscalculate." The Valkyrie observers watched in stunned silence as the first human actually launched himself into space, using nothing but gravitational mathematics and what appeared to be suicidal confidence. Daehyun rode the gravitational wave like an invisible elevator, reaching the floating landmass and collecting his samples before riding another wave back to the surface. "Impossible," whispered observer Kethvar. "The gravitational forces should have torn him apart." "And yet he succeeded," Commander Zepthul noted grimly. "Continue documentation. The High Council will want to know exactly how they accomplished this." By the end of their second day on the Chaos World, the human team had not only collected all their required samples, but had actually mapped the gravitational wave patterns well enough to predict safe zones hours in advance. They had turned an environment of pure destruction into a navigation system, using the very forces trying to kill them as tools for survival. "You know what I love about this job?" said Han Sol during their evening meal, speaking around a bite of reconstituted protein that somehow tasted better when eaten in defiance of impossible odds. "Every day brings new ways to almost die." "Almost being the key word," Junho replied. "We're getting pretty good at the almost part." Daehyun looked around at his team and realized they had all changed during their time in the anomaly zone. They moved with a confidence that came from having survived the unsurvivable, spoke with the easy humor of people who had looked death in the face and decided it wasn't that impressive. On their final day, as they prepared to leave the Chaos World, behind Mi Young made a discovery that changed everything. While analyzing the gravitational data they had collected, she found something hidden in the wave patterns that shouldn't have been there. "These aren't natural gravitational anomalies," she announced, her voice tight with sudden realization. "The patterns are too complex, too organized. Someone is controlling them." Daehyun looked at the data she was showing him and felt ice form in his stomach. "The Valkyrie? Has to be. This entire world is an artificial testing ground. They're not just observing how we handle gravitational chaos. They're creating it and adjusting the difficulty level based on our performance." The implications hit the entire team like a physical blow. The Valkyrie weren't just testing human survival capabilities. They were actively trying to find humanity's breaking point. Each test was being adjusted to push them closer and closer to complete failure. "Sir," said Kyung-min quietly, "if they can control gravitational fields this precisely, what else can they do?" Dae-hyun didn't answer immediately. He was thinking about all the human colonies across space. Woo-jin had spent 15 years in intelligence work, but infiltrating an alien space station was still the most dangerous assignment of his career. The Valkyrie command facility hung in the darkness between stars like a metallic spider web, its twisted corridors and chambers defying human understanding of architecture. Getting inside had required him to hide aboard a supply transport, breathing recycled air in a cargo container for 18 hours, while Valkyrie workers loaded equipment around him. Now he crouched in a maintenance shaft barely wide enough for his shoulders, listening to alien voices discuss the fate of humanity, in words he was only beginning to understand. The translation device Dr. Yoonji had built for him was working perfectly, converting the musical tones of Valkyrie speech into clear Korean in his earpiece. "The human survival rates continue to exceed all projections," one voice was saying. "Test. Site 7 should have eliminated the entire engineering team within 12 hours. Instead, they not only survived, but actually thrived in conditions that would kill our own species." "And the gravitational anomaly zone?" asked another voice, deeper and more resonant than the first. "Even more concerning. The geological team didn't just survive the chaos field, they learned to control it. Our observers report that humans appear to have an intuitive understanding of complex systems that allows them to find patterns where none should exist." Woo-jin carefully adjusted his position in the cramped shaft, trying to get a better view through the ventilation grate. Below him, 3 Valkyrie stood around a holographic display showing test results from human assessment sites across the galaxy. The data made his blood run cold. 17 test sites, 15 successful adaptations, the first Valkyrie continued. Only 2 sites resulted in complete mission failure, and in both cases, the humans requested additional time to solve the environmental challenges. "This confirms our worst fears," said the third alien, whose crystalline formations were larger and more elaborate than the others. "The humans represent the same threat pattern we've seen before. They adapt too quickly, survive too easily, and show no respect for natural limits." Woo-jin's training had taught him to remain calm under pressure, but what he was hearing made his hands shake with rage. The Valkyrie weren't just testing humans. They were following a protocol they had used before. Other species had been subjected to these same trials, and those who had proven too capable of survival had simply disappeared from the galaxy. "How many species have we processed through the assessment protocol?" asked the deep-voiced Valkyrie. 143 over the past 10,000 years. 67 were deemed compatible with our civilization and were integrated peacefully. 76 were classified as potential threats and were eliminated. The casual way they discussed genocide made Woo-jin's stomach turn. He forced himself to keep listening as the aliens continued their planning session. "The humans present unique challenges," the lead Valkyrie was saying. "Their psychological resilience appears to be unlimited. Previous species showed signs of breaking under extreme stress, but humans seem to become stronger when faced with impossible odds." "What about their technology?" asked the third alien. "Primitive but highly adaptable. They build tools specifically, designed to fail safely, then repair and improve them under field conditions. Our observers report that human equipment often performs better after being damaged than it did when new." Woo-jin thought about the reports he had read from the assessment teams. Jinho's group had turned a toxic death world into a functioning base camp. Dae-hyun's team had surfed gravitational waves that should have torn them apart. Every human team sent to die had instead found ways to thrive. "The real concern is their refusal to accept defeat," continued the lead Valkyrie. "Other species, when faced with clearly impossible situations, would attempt to minimize losses and preserve what they could. Humans appear to view impossible situations as interesting puzzles to be solved. This is exactly the behavior pattern that led to the Genkari extinction event 3,000 years ago," the deep-voiced alien noted grimly. "A species that adapts too quickly becomes a threat to galactic stability." Woo-jin carefully activated his recording device making sure to capture every word of what came next. The Velkari were about to reveal information that could save or doom his entire species. The High Council has reviewed the assessment data and reached a preliminary decision, the lead alien announced. Humanity is to be classified as a Class 7 existential threat. Containment protocols will begin immediately. What about the humans currently undergoing assessment? They will complete their final tests as planned. We need comprehensive data on human limits before implementing full containment. Once we understand exactly how much they can survive, we can design elimination methods that will be completely effective. The three Velkari began discussing technical details of something they called systematic species termination protocols. They spoke about destroying human worlds with the same clinical detachment that human scientists might use to discuss eliminating a bacterial infection. Wu Jin had heard enough. He carefully backed through the maintenance shaft, moving as silently as his training had taught him. Getting this information back to human space was now more important than gathering additional intelligence. Humanity needed to know that they weren't being tested for membership in an alien civilization. They were being evaluated for extinction. Meanwhile, on a research station 3 sectors away, Dr. Yunji was making discoveries that would have terrified the Velkari if they had known about them. Working with data collected from the assessment sites, she had been analyzing the physiological and psychological changes that humans underwent when faced with extreme stress. The results are remarkable, she explained to her research team via secure transmission. Humans don't just adapt to hostile environments. We actually become stronger as individuals and as a species when faced with existential challenges. Her colleague, Dr. Sang-Woo, looked skeptical. That contradicts everything we know about stress physiology. Extreme stress should break down biological systems, not enhance them. That's true for short-term stress, Yunji agreed. But humans have evolved a unique response to long-term existential threats. Our brain chemistry actually changes when we're faced with survival situations that require innovation. We become more creative, more cooperative, and more capable of finding solutions that shouldn't be possible. She brought up brain scans from the assessment teams, showing neurological activity patterns that defied medical understanding. Look at these readings from Jin Ho's team after their first day on the toxic world. Their brain activity shows increased connections between regions responsible for creative problem-solving and pattern recognition. They weren't just surviving, they were literally becoming smarter. What about the psychological profiles? Asked Dr. Min Jung, their behavioral specialist. Even more interesting. The assessment teams all show decreased stress responses and increased confidence levels as their missions progressed. Instead of being worn down by impossible challenges, they were energized by them. Yunji pulled up comparative data from other species that had been exposed to similar stress tests. The differences were stark and unmistakable. Every other species shows predictable breakdown patterns under extreme stress. Decreased cognitive function, increased anxiety, reduced cooperation between individuals. Humans show the exact opposite. They become more capable, more confident, and more unified when faced with extinction-level threats. That explains why the Velkari are so interested in testing our limits, Dr. Sang-Woo realized. They're not trying to understand our capabilities. They're trying to find our breaking point. Exactly. And based on this data, I'm not sure we have one. Yunji's research was interrupted by an emergency transmission from Wu Jin. His report from the Velkari command facility changed everything they thought they knew about the assessment program. They're planning to exterminate humanity, Wu Jin's voice said through the encrypted channel. The tests aren't for membership in their civilization. They're to determine the most effective way to kill us all. The silence that followed his report was deafening. Finally, Dr. Yunji spoke. How long do we have? Unknown. They want to complete the final assessment phase first. But once they have that data, they'll begin what they call containment protocols. Based on what I overheard, that means systematic destruction of human worlds. Dr. Sang-Woo was already pulling up strategic analyses on his workstation. We need to warn command immediately. If the Velkari are planning genocidal action, We need to prepare defensive measures. Defense won't be enough, Inji said quietly, studying the data from her research. Look at these patterns. Every time humans are faced with extinction-level threats, we don't just survive. We emerge stronger than before. The Velkari think they're testing us to find our weaknesses, but they're actually teaching us exactly how resilient we really are. She looked around at her team, seeing understanding dawn in their faces. They've been training us, she continued. Every impossible test, every unsurvivable challenge, they've been showing us that we can handle anything they throw at us. And now they want to use that data to destroy us? Wu Jin's voice came through the transmission again. Taemin stood on the bridge of the Human Defense Command ship, watching the Velkari invasion fleet approach through the darkness of space. 300 massive vessels moved toward human-controlled systems with the confidence of predators who had never faced serious resistance. They had no idea that their prey had been preparing for this moment ever since Wu Jin's intelligence report had reached command 6 months ago. Status report, Taemin requested, his voice calm despite the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. All assessment teams have returned and shared their survival techniques with colony defense forces, reported Captain Yu Jin from the communications station. Jinho's atmospheric adaptation protocols have been distributed to every human world with hostile environments. Daehyun's gravitational manipulation techniques are being used to fortify settlements in unstable systems. What about the special projects? Dr. Yoonji's psychological resilience training has been implemented across all human military units. Wu Jin's infiltration methods are being taught to intelligence operatives throughout human space. We're as ready as we can be. Taemin nodded, though ready felt like an inadequate word for what humanity was about to face. The Velkari had spent 10,000 years perfecting their methods of species elimination. They had wiped out 76 different civilizations with clinical efficiency. But they had made one critical mistake. They had taught humanity exactly how much they could survive before deciding to destroy them. Incoming transmission from the Velkari fleet, announced Operator Chang Ho. Its ambassador Thekmor. The familiar image of the alien diplomat appeared on the main screen, his crystalline formations glowing with what might have been satisfaction. Commander Taemin, representing the Human Colonial Defense Force. Your species has completed the assessment phase and has been classified as incompatible with galactic civilization. You will surrender your worlds for peaceful processing, or we will take them by force. Define peaceful processing, Taemin replied, though he already knew the answer. Complete elimination of human presence from all inhabited systems. Your species has proven too dangerous to be allowed to continue existing. You adapt too quickly, survive too easily, and refuse to accept natural limitations. The galaxy cannot risk allowing such a species to expand unchecked. Taemin looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. He saw determination mixed with anger, the same expression he had been seeing on human faces ever since they learned the truth about the Velkari assessments. It was the look of people who had been pushed too far and were finally ready to push back. You made a mistake, Thekmor, Taemin said quietly. You wanted to test our limits, but in the process you taught us that we don't have any. Every impossible challenge you threw at us just proved that impossible is just another word for difficult. Your defiance is irrelevant. The Velkari Empire has eliminated species far more advanced than humanity. You cannot resist us. You're right, Taemin agreed. We can't resist you, but we can do something much worse. The transmission ended, and Taemin turned to his crew. All ships, execute Survival Protocol 1. Show them what they taught us. Across human space, the response to the Velkari invasion was unlike anything the aliens had expected. Instead of gathering their forces for conventional battles, humans simply disappeared. Entire colonies evacuated to locations that should have been uninhabitable. The toxic worlds, the chaos zones, the radiation-soaked systems where the Velkari had tested them before. On the planet where Jinho had once built an impossible base camp in crushing gravity and poisonous atmosphere, 50,000 human refugees established a thriving settlement using techniques learned during the assessment tests. The Velkari scouts who found them couldn't understand how humans were not only surviving but actually expanding their facilities in conditions that would kill Velkari observers in minutes. In the gravitational anomaly zone where Dae-Hyun had learned to surf space-time distortions, human engineers built weapons that used the same chaotic forces that had once threatened to tear them apart. When Velkari ships entered the system, they found themselves caught in artificial gravitational whirlpools that ripped their vessels apart, while human fighters danced between the destructive forces like they were gentle currents. "This is impossible," Commander Zep Thul reported to the Velkari High Council. "The humans have retreated to worlds that our own forces cannot safely approach. They're using environments we classified as completely uninhabitable as strategic strongholds." "What about their technology?" demanded High Counselor Redhan. "They're building weapons and defenses using principles they learned during our assessment tests. Somehow they've turned every survival technique we observed into military applications. Their equipment is crude but effective, and it works in environments where our technology fails." The truth was even worse than the Velkari realized. Dr. Yunji's research into human stress responses had led to the development of psychological conditioning that made human soldiers literally immune to fear. When faced with Velkari forces, human troops didn't just fight back. They adapted to enemy tactics in real time, turning each defeat into a learning experience that made them stronger. "Sir," reported Intelligence Officer Hyo Jung to Tai Min during one of their strategy meetings, "we're getting reports from Velkari survivors that their forces are beginning to refuse missions against human targets. Apparently, fighting an enemy that becomes stronger when defeated is having severe psychological effects on their military." Tai Min wasn't surprised. The Velkari had spent 10,000 years fighting enemies who behaved predictably, who weakened when damaged, who retreated when overwhelmed, who eventually broke under enough pressure. Humans did the opposite of everything the Velkari understood about warfare. The turning point came when Ji-hee, representing a coalition of human survivors, requested a meeting with the Velkari High Council. The session was held on a neutral space station, with Thekmor serving as translator between the two species. "You wanted to understand why humans survive what no one else can," Ji-hee said, looking directly at the assembled alien leaders. "The answer is simple. We never learned how to quit." High Counselor Redhan leaned forward, his crystalline formations flickering with agitation. "Your defiance will only delay the inevitable. We have eliminated 76 species over 10 millennia. We will eliminate humanity as well." "No, you won't," Ji-hee replied calmly, "because you fundamentally misunderstand what you're dealing with. Every other species you've eliminated was trying to preserve what they had. We're not trying to preserve anything. We're trying to grow." She gestured to a holographic display showing human settlements across the galaxy. "You destroyed our homeworlds, so we built better ones in places you can't reach. You attacked our colonies, so we scattered to 1,000 different systems and learned to thrive in conditions that kill your scouts. You tried to break our spirit by showing us impossible challenges, and instead you taught us that impossible just means no one has figured out how to do it yet." The silence in the council chamber was absolute. Finally, Thekmor spoke. "What do you want from us?" "Nothing," Ji-hee said simply. "We don't want your empire. We don't want your technology, and we don't want your approval. We just want you to leave us alone to do what humans do best: survive, adapt, and grow." "And if we refuse?" Ji-hee smiled, and there was something in that expression that made every Velkari in the room step backward. "Then we'll show you what happens when you try to eliminate a species that doesn't know when to die. You've spent 10,000 years as the apex predators of this galaxy, safe in the knowledge that any species dangerous enough to threaten you could be eliminated before they became a real problem." She stood up, her movement causing several Velkari guards to reach for their weapons. "But you made a mistake with humanity. You didn't eliminate us when we were weak. Instead, you trained us. You taught us how much we could survive, how strong we could become, and how much we could accomplish when everyone told us it was impossible. Thank you for the education." "You're threatening us?" Redhan demanded. "I'm explaining to you why we're not. We could destroy your empire tomorrow if we wanted to. Your species requires controlled environments to survive. We've learned to thrive in chaos. Your technology works within specific parameters. Ours adapts to any situation. Your military breaks when faced with unpredictable threats. Ours gets stronger. Jihai looked around the council chamber at faces that were beginning to show what might have been fear. But we're not going to destroy you, because that's what you would do. Instead, we're going to do something that will probably terrify you, much more than any weapon we could build. What? Thekmore asked quietly. We're going to teach other species how to survive the way humans do. We're going to show them that they don't have to accept your definition of what's possible. We're going to spread across this galaxy and help every species you've oppressed learn that limitations exist only in the mind. The implications of what she was saying hit the Velkari like a physical blow. Their entire civilization was built on the idea that they were naturally superior to other species, that their dominance was inevitable and permanent.